And you're very welcome. This is The Beautiful Truth on breakfornews.com with Fintan Dunne reporting. Thanks for joining me, and it's good to be back on air after a protracted absence. Yes, I've been in the forum posting away, but it's not the same, is it? Not the same for me either, and it's great to be back here. And you can look forward to more audios and indeed some interviews in the weeks ahead. Okay, we're going to take a look at the entire Osama bin Laden episode, why it happened now, what's going on, and what the New World Order are up to. And so let's get straight on with it. You know, it seems like only yesterday, because of the continuing wall of propaganda emanating out of the English-speaking press, but it was in fact weeks ago when Americans woke up to this astonishing news.
The other person in the world named Osama bin Laden can finally relax, and the bullet that killed the notorious terrorist is a guest on Good Morning America. It's the week of Osama bin Laden's grisly murder, and this is the Onion Review. Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden was ambushed and murdered while sitting on the toilet, the American people enjoyed imagining this week. In the dramatic and fictional series of events conjured up in every American's head, bin Laden shrieked like a little girl and scrambled to pull up his boxer shorts, right as a Navy SEAL team kicked down the bathroom stall door and blew his fucking head off.
Yes, indeed. That's the Onion doing it as only the Onion can do it. But this is an occasion when mainstream media reports actually sound like an Onion send-up, even though they're mainstream media reports. Osama bin Laden was taken out by Obama bin President, as we all now know. Osama bin President on the helicopters that flew in that night, scaling down the rope, abseiling down the front of the building, storming up the stairs and personally shooting Osama bin Laden, to the cheers of the home team back in the White House watching on. It was a no-brainer to bring Osama bin President on the operation, according to the SEAL team leader, because A, he needed the votes, and B, of course, he didn't have to black up. But you don't have to look very far for the first and key motivation for this incident taking place at this time, and it's that we're already in the 2012 presidential election season. And if you remember Obama's last bid for the presidency, the MO is to, well, beat you to death for years with Obama propaganda. You remember the last time, all that staged confrontation with Hillary Clinton that went on for, gosh, it must have been 18 months before they finally held an election. At that stage, you would have voted for him even if you opposed him. And many did. So that's the strategy this time also. We're in the 2012 re-election season for Barack Obama, or Osama, or somebody. And we know from the reports which have come out in the media that, in fact, Osama bin Laden wanted to kill Barack, didn't he? Yes, he had Obama bin President on his death list. I believe also there are some reports about to come out that Osama bin Laden also opposed Barack Obama's healthcare reform bill. And apparently Osama bin Laden also likes Sarah Palin. All that's to come. All part of the election campaign, don't you know? So that's the key motivation for it taking place at this time, is to springboard Barack Obama back into some kind of condition where he could take on the presidency. He needs that, of course, after the incisive way in which the Tea Party had, as we all know, removed his testicles and inserted them up his rectum in the recent elections in the United States, putting an end to Barry Obama's entire agenda. So something needed to be done to scrape Barry off the floor and polish him up into presidential material, and this is the start of it. Well, not quite the start of it. The start of it was Donald Trump's fake bid for the presidency in order to introduce the birther issue back onto the agenda and persuade everybody that Barack Obama is a reasonable guy and birthers are crazy people that you wouldn't want to vote for. But back to Osama bin Laden. It was, of course, rather disappointing, the entire affair. As a New World Order operation, I found it rather disappointing. I remember the good old days when we were dealing with the downfall of Saddam, and we got a guy strutting around. Okay, he looked a bit different, and he now had a beard, and he'd lost a lot of weight, and we weren't allowed to see him on video and audio at the same time, because they had two different guys, one of whom looked like him and one of whom sounded like him, but they couldn't put the two together. But nevertheless, it was a theatrical performance, and we got a lot of value for money. They put a lot of effort into that. By comparison, the Osama bin Laden exercise was rather thin. I mean, what have we got out of Osama bin Laden besides a few scratchy videos over the last 10 years or so? Very, very disappointing. And also rather transparent. And part of the reason for that, if you haven't twigged the reasons for the transparency in these psychological operations to date, part of the reason for that is that they want you to half know that it is all bullshit. But they want you also to half think that maybe it isn't bullshit, because the entire mainstream media is barbling away about this day after day after day after day, beating you to death. Remember that they've had years to prepare for this, so they have a raft of material prepared, and you get daily releases of new little nuggets about Osama bin Laden, how he loved porn and how he wanted to kill Barry, and how he communicated by email using a special system where he copied his emails to a flash drive and gave them to somebody to take to an internet cafe and bring them back, and on and on and on and on, and this dribble of information will be fed out for months, folks. And the aim of that will be to sort of reinforce by repetition that but they must have killed the guy. I mean, they must have. But at the same time, we know that they couldn't have really. It's all bullshit, isn't it? And so that catches you between knowing and not knowing, and that's where they want you to be. That's how you achieve the effect with psychological operations. Not necessarily by being extremely convincing, but by being sort of half convincing, and then catching you in that land of uncertainty where you're not really sure, and where you're unstable, and where they can manipulate your brain. So be aware of that as much as the CIA fakes, as I call them, in other words, the bought and paid for alternative media, who were screaming from the rooftops about the holes in this story, realize that they play an essential role as well. They're pointing out the holes in this story because that's the not knowing side of the equation, which is counterpointed by the mainstream's knowing side of the equation. See, the psychological operations boys have got the population divided into two groups. Those two groups are, on the one hand, people dumb enough to believe what's on the mainstream TV and not question it, and be too afraid, too scared, essentially, to face up to the reality that it is in fact bullshit. And then on the other hand, those people who are just a little bit smarter than that and don't buy the bullshit on mainstream TV, and to them, they will put out all this stuff about, hey, it's fake, it's fake, it's fake, it's fake. But at the same time as they're doing that, then they will hammer them to death with all the mainstream stuff saying, no, it's not fake. And with that, they're saying, look, it is fake, but hey, we control everything. Look, the mainstream media danced to our tune. There's nothing you can do about this stuff. So that's destabilization. It's meant to undermine you. So I'm not going to add to it to any considerable degree, because you can find all that stuff about how it's fake. It's all over the place. And if you're listening to this show, you've probably been exposed to that material anyhow. No. We're going to look into motivations more than the mechanisms, the tired old mechanisms which I've outlined before. And before we leave the issue of motivations, besides Barry's need for the votes, there are also the geostrategic requirements in relation to military deployment in Afghanistan. People in the United States are getting a little bit tired of that. So what you're being set up for here is you're being set up for success. Success, we got 'em. So that by the time it comes around to 2012, Barry will be able to come forward saying, well, hey, I personally shot the guy, and also, you know, we're just going to polish off Al-Qaeda now, and we've got him on the run. We've taken out the number one boy who was running the operation, and so stick with us through 2013, you know, stick with us up to 2014 when we pull them all out, but like we're well on the way. So it's intended to set the scene for Barack Obama to make that kind of triumphant, mission accomplished George Bush type of thing in the lead-in to the 2012 election. And in the meantime, it's also shoring up support for what will be a rather bloody campaign during the course of the rest of this year. But they're on the way out of Afghanistan. In fact, they're on the way out. The New World Order, on the way out. There is not much up their sleeve in terms of new stuff they're going to hammer you with, folks. No, this is the big wind down. They've taken out the number one boy, which is also the number one motivation, the number one excuse, the number one bad guy. So you don't do that kind of thing unless you're actually winding down the entire militarization phenomenon. Now, they will still bang away at the Al-Qaeda threat, yes, but in terms of boots on the ground, in terms of money spent, in terms of the focus, that's all going to start to diminish and diminish and diminish. And they will pull out of Afghanistan. So setting the scene is what's going on, and providing the necessary propaganda support for the continuing military campaigns in Afghanistan by the NATO forces. Motivation number 1, the votes. Motivation number 2, setting the scene for the success and eventual exit out of Afghanistan. And motivation number 3, playing nasty, dirty games in Pakistani politics, which this has also been about. Now, the ISI, Pakistani Intelligence Services, huge numbers of the ISI are working hand in hand with the CIA, always have been. But at the same time, there are rogue elements within the ISI, rogue elements to the extent that there are people who actually believe in Pakistani national self-determination and don't like their country being pushed around by the New World Order. And there are also politicians and large swathes of the population who are of the same mind. And they're getting a little bit tired of getting pushed around by the New World Order. And so this was designed to provide a propaganda basis for launching a sort of root out the Pakistani nationalists campaign. So who was supporting bin Laden is the cry going out. What nasty elements within the Pakistani military and Pakistani intelligence services were actually supporting this scum, Osama bin Laden, and let's root him out. Of course, the supporters they'll be rooting out, alleged supporters of Osama bin Laden, are actually going to be supporters of Pakistani national self-determination. So they're looking after their buddies in the Pakistani power structure, and this is part of that propaganda campaign in order to destabilize Pakistan and at the same time try and stave off the fatal day where they will face the kind of resistance in Pakistan which they are facing pretty much all around the world now ever since they screwed everybody with the subprime ripoff. Those are the lies and the motivations for the lies. But where's the truth? What really did happen that night? And what's the real situation with Osama bin Laden? Is he alive? Is he dead? Is he on a desert island somewhere with his feet up, drinking margaritas? We'll get to that. Well, in fact, we'll get straight to it right now, because one of the issues in terms of truth and lies touches upon that whole question of playing games in Pakistani politics. And even today, May 17th, as I record this audio, there's an account on Business Insider by Robert Johnson. Detailed account of bin Laden raid reveals how it nearly ended in disaster. And it talks about how they had a problem with one of the helicopters, which meant that they almost messed up. And they had to go in. They were hoping to go in on the roof and on the ground floor at the same time, but it turned out they could only go in on the ground floor, had to fight their way in, etc., etc. And the assumption, I'm quoting here now, the assumption bin Laden was living on the top floor of the compound proved correct. And he was first identified in the hallway outside his bedroom. 3 SEALs stormed the room where he was killed. The deep mistrust the US holds towards Pakistan's intelligence service excuse me, bullshit, is what compelled the unannounced raid and the stealthy but often unpredictable helicopter technology. So they had to sneak in there in case Pakistani intelligence found out what was going on, says this article today by Robert Johnson on Business Insider. Of course, they're hoping that you're not smart enough to check out maybe another news media site like Global Post, where an article entitled, you can Google this, Bin Laden raid, neighbours say Pakistan knew, will give you a completely different account of what was going on. I'll quote some from that also. It was 11:40 p.m. on May the 1st when 2 plain-clothed security personnel knocked on the door of Niaz Ali, who lives just 100 metres from the compound where Osama bin Laden, the most wanted man on the planet, was hiding. 2 men asked Ali to turn off the lights inside and outside his house and to stay indoors until further notice. Ali obliged, not bothering to ask their names. He said it was obvious they were either Pakistani intelligence or military officers, recognizable by their short haircuts, strong build, and fluent Pashto. About 6 people who'd been living in houses near the Al-Qaeda leader, said they'd similar experiences in the hours before the US helicopters descended on the compound, suggesting there had been some sort of security-related activity on behalf of the Pakistanis before the US helicopters entered Pakistan's airspace. These local reports support the claims made by several senior Pakistani military and intelligence officials who told Global Post, on condition their names not be used, that in fact there were elements of both the intelligence community and the army that knew of the raid beforehand, and there was more cooperation between the two countries than officials are publicly admitting. In fact, says the report, they were sealing off all the roads in the neighbourhood. Residents said the presence of security personnel was rare, and they appeared to be guarding streets leading to and from bin Laden's compound, and this is in advance of the raid. Who are you going to believe, Business Insider or Global Post? All I can say is Business Insider is a dirty, stinking propaganda rag. But there are other aspects, truth aspects, which haven't come out. You'll recall, and perhaps you've even seen photographs of that chopper that apparently had difficulties in taking off and couldn't take off. And we see it in pieces, and we're told that it was destroyed by US forces before they left, in order that it wouldn't fall into the wrong hands, etc. However, an entirely different account was heard on the Pakistani TV station Sama, S-A-M-A-A. I'll link to that Global Post report and this Sama TV report in the forum post that goes with this audio. But a different account is given of the reason why that helicopter was in pieces inside the compound. And that account comes from a guy who was interviewed on Sama TV called Mohammed Bashir, a resident of Bilal town in Abbottabad. And he lives in front of Osama bin Laden's house. And he was present on the rooftop, and he saw the entire American operation, according to a translation, which is on Ning.com. And according to that translation, I'll quote from Bashir's account of what happened. He saw helicopters coming in. The TV anchor says, Mohammed Bashir told us something no one else said before, so we checked his identity card and we confirmed that he really lives there. Bashir's account goes as follows. We were awake, not asleep. A helicopter came. Some men came down from that into that house. Then that helicopter went away. Reporter, how many men? Bashir, 10, 12. Then that helicopter took around those rear hills, and then he came back. And when he came back, 2 more helicopters arrived, one from the west and the other from the north. There was a blast in the first helicopter, and it was on fire. We immediately came out. When we reached there, the helicopter was burning. Then after about 20 minutes, the army and police arrived. They pushed us back. Now we are asking if Osama was there and who took him to America, because all those men that came in the helicopter died in the blast. Now, if Osama was in that helicopter, he must have died and got burnt in that helicopter too. Then how they took him? This is a question of serious concern. America claims they killed him and picked him up. How did they pick him up? This is what we were thinking. Was there only one helicopter? Yes, the other that came back flew away to Mansehra, and there was only one that landed the men and then came back to pick them up. But as he was picking them up, it blew away and caught fire. They were in it when it blew. Yes, they were. How do you know? We saw it with our own eyes. You saw dead men? Yes, dead men. How many? I couldn't count, because the compound was on fire. The gate was open. We went in. The army and police hadn't arrived then. There were some people, but they weren't stopping them. The whole neighbourhood has seen that, but they're silent now. We saw the helicopter burning. We saw the dead bodies. Then everything was removed, and now there is nothing. How many dead bodies you saw? We couldn't count them, because they were blown to pieces. And so it sounds, according to that account, that it wasn't a question of a helicopter being blown up because it had problems taking off, but a helicopter blew up. And as a result, there were significant casualties. But you don't want to admit those kinds of significant casualties in what is being portrayed as a successful military operation, now do you? But not to worry. Those kind of details will never get much attention, especially as I say, they've had years to prepare this, and so there were swathes of information coming out to make sure that you were overwhelmed with information, in fact, often contradictory information, which made it very difficult to figure out what was actually going on and what really did or didn't happen. Some of the information was classic red herring material. For example, we bust in and he reached for a gun, and so we had to shoot him. Later admission, well, actually we shot him in the back of the head. Later admission, oh no, we didn't. That, of course, set us up for the red herring of, well, should we have carried out this extrajudicial killing with leftist civil liberties type immediately popping up saying, oh no, we should have brought him back, he's entitled to due process, you know. Well, let's have a big controversy about whether he was entitled to due process, even if he was responsible for the murder of thousands of Americans on 9/11, allegedly. He still should have been brought back to the United States, and so we can have a big debate on network TV about whether he should or shouldn't have been shot, rather than whether it was or wasn't in fact him that was shot, which is a much more interesting question that we get nicely diverted away from into these red herring issues, which are dragged up. Very little truth in what has come out, the stories that have come out in the media since, because the people who are in that compound are either in custody and allegedly saying things to Pakistani intelligence, which are then passed on allegedly to the CIA and then passed on into the media as if we know them firsthand, when in fact all we're getting is regurgitated material which has been planted. Osama's son was there, or wasn't there, escaped, or didn't escape. We do know for sure from the photographs that one of Osama's sons was definitely there and was killed. So it's likely that this house was indeed an Al-Qaeda house, in inverted commas. I say inverted commas because Al-Qaeda is a fictional entity which exists as a cohesive organization only in the imagination of the American people. But it certainly was a house which contained at least one of Osama bin Laden's sons who was killed in the attack. And as to what else happened, fabrication, folks. Fabrication. Extensively planned and detailed fabrication. But leading us to one key question. So, Osama bin Laden, be he alive or be he dead? And if he be dead, did he die on May the 1st or did he die back in 2001, over 10 years ago? Well, that's an interesting question because, as I pointed out earlier on, you get two versions of events. You get the mainstream version and then you get the alternative version, and the alternative version is as carefully constructed as the mainstream version and is largely as much bullshit as the mainstream version. And speaking of bullshit, we can go to no better bullshit source than AlexJonesInfowars.com for a story on May the 12th, 2011 by that propagandist for the New World Order, Paul Joseph Watson. Top doctor confirms bin Laden had Marfan syndrome and died in 2001. And the article goes into great detail about a guest on the Alex Jones show talking about, hey, we all know he died back in 2001. And the article quotes, according to French intelligence reports, CIA agents visited bin Laden at the American hospital in Dubai in July 2001, 2 months before 9/11. Now, French intelligence are routinely used as a sort of rogue agency by the New World Order intelligence apparatus. The spin being that, hey, French intelligence, you know those Frenchies, they're a bit unreliable. They let stuff leak that the CIA would never let on to. Well, folks, French intelligence are the CIA. You know, there is no functional difference. French intelligence are also reported to be notoriously at war with British intelligence, suspicious of those nasty Brits, and the Brits suspicious of those dubious froggies. That's the spin put out, but in fact they work hand in hand, and that's all spin, folks. CIA, British and French intelligence, all one cohesive entity, with French intelligence being used to leak reports like this, that bin Laden was visited by the CIA at the American hospital in Dubai in July 2001. In fact, there was another French intelligence leak which stated that bin Laden was dead, and Jacques Chirac at the time, a few years ago, said he would investigate, find out where this leak came from. So they've been pushing this bin Laden's dead already meme, you know that, for years. For years. And the reports are endless. You know, CBS News reported bin Laden was having kidney dialysis treatment the night before 9/11, according to this article on Infowars.com. Top doctor confirms bin Laden had Marfan syndrome. Google it. And the CIA admitted back in 2008 that bin Laden has suffered from kidney failure. Other accounts, says the article, claimed Osama was suffering from hepatitis C and had only 2 more years to live. Despite all these health problems, on Saturday the White House released video footage of bin Laden, which it claimed was filmed in the fall of 2010, which show a younger and healthier looking Osama compared to video footage from 2001. So in the alternative media, you are being spun this line that Osama bin Laden died in 2001, or maybe 2002, or 2004, or 2008, or 2006. He's definitely dead. He's definitely dead in one of those years, or perhaps all of them at the same time. But he's definitely dead, and it's sometime 2001 onwards that he's dead. So if you know that that's just bullshit, and that's just the alternative bullshit line been fed to you, what you then have got to figure out, if you're going to be a seasoned investigator of these issues, is so what's the real truth, and why are they spinning me this line about bin Laden and 2001, 2002, 2006, 2007? Yes, I know the videos are all fake. Everyone knows they're fake because you can clearly see they're fake. But what's the real story? And why are they pushing this line in the alternative conspiracy, in inverted commas, media, that bin Laden's dead since 2001 or subsequent? Well, let's inch our way towards the truth, shall we? Okay, first question. Maybe he's alive. Maybe he's on a desert island somewhere. Don't think so, folks. Don't think so. Bit of a liability, that one. You got the most wanted terrorist on the planet, and he's going to be alive somewhere. And potentially that can blow the entire war on terror, the entire 9/11 issue out of the water. No. I don't think that bin Laden is alive. And the issue of Marfan syndrome is quite interesting, because bin Laden does fit the physical description of someone who suffers from that genetic disorder, which is commonly found in people who are uncommonly tall, as bin Laden was. And so that may be an element of truth. But I would put it to you that the reason they're hammering on so hard, and French intelligence leaking out to you that he was alive in 2001, and that CBS reported he was having kidney dialysis treatment the night before 9/11, is they want you to think that he was still alive in July 2001. And I put it to you that the convenience of Osama bin Laden for the bin Laden family, for the Saudis, who are working very closely with the Bushes, the bin Laden family and the Saudi aristocracy and the Saudi intelligence services and the entire Saudi empire, is that his usefulness to them as a fall guy for the 9/11 attacks rested entirely on the fact that Osama bin Laden was dead long before the 9/11 attacks, years before the 9/11 attacks, which made him the perfect patsy. The perfect patsy, he's already dead. His usefulness to the bin Laden family is the fact that he's dead, and the fact that he can then be used as a convenient scapegoat. What's the harm? There's a lot of money to be made out of it. He's dead anyway. And so he is the perfect patsy. And that's why they're continually pushing that line to you about 2001, because he was dead years before. I've said this before, and whenever I'm asked about the issue, all I say is, look, he died in 1999. I'm just using that figure, just to try and get it into people's consciousness that no, he's dead beforehand. I can't say when he was dead. I just give you my analysis of what they were up to, and the most logical reason that I can find for what you know is going to be lies coming out on Infowars.com and through Alex Jones and Paul Joseph Watson, is that in fact they want you to think he's still alive in 2001 because he's dead years before. That's the bit they don't want you catching on to, that he's dead years before. Have a think about that one. So I hope we've shed some light on what's really going on. We've seen motivations in relation to Barack Obama's re-election, in relation to destabilization and messing around and trying to defend the position of the CIA agents within the Pakistani political and military structure and intelligence structure. And we've seen the reasons why they're doing it in terms of justifying the ongoing involvement in Afghanistan. But what have they got up their sleeve? Nothing. It's over. It's over, folks. They're not going to come out on TV in the morning and say this whole war and terror gig. It's on the way out. We're phasing it out. It's history. But it is. And that's why they took out the number one bad guy. Because it's history. It's over. The propaganda will continue. But there'll be more words than actions from now on. And the New World Order is isolated internationally. The New World Order, this is their swan song. Osama bin Laden being allegedly killed at this time is the signal that tells you they're finished. They still have to be defeated within core countries where they have power and control, like the United States, Great Britain and France, for example. But elsewhere, well, the world's changed a lot since they screwed everybody so badly internationally, and it all blew up in their faces in 2008. I told you back then, in 2008, the New World Order is imploding, and it is a dangerous time. That danger has passed. They have continued to implode, and it's over. But to clarify again, when I say the New World Order is over, I mean that plan for global domination, that plan to use both military might and economic chicanery and the World Trade Organization and privatization and neoliberalization, that whole agenda which emerged in the 1980s with the Reagan presidency and with the rise of Wall Street. It's over at an international level. It's defeated. And everybody's maneuvering. They're forming alliances. That process is continuing. The New World Order, as a global dream, is dead. But they still have to be defeated in the homeland. And in the homelands in the United Kingdom and France in particular. In other countries, the New World Order factions are increasingly marginalized, increasingly under threat, and politicians and society in general is responding to those cataclysmic economic events of 2008, and they're changing the way they do things in order to get themselves fundamentally away and out from under the control of the New World Order. Now, finally, it will be possible to make progress on issues like 9/11, which is why Barack Obama was careful to milk the issue by going to ground zero, not just for the vote-gaining aspects of being seen at ground zero, but also because they hope to bury the 9/11 issue along with Osama bin Laden, to consign all that to the past, never to be looked at again, that it's history now. But it ain't history. It's going to come back to haunt them. And if I can do anything to help that process, I will. And I urge you to continue to make sure that the events of 9/11 do haunt them, because that's the key to taking them down. Alright, that's it for this edition. I will be back with more audios, analysis and interviews in the weeks ahead, and I hope you can join me for those. But in the meantime, for breakfornews.com, this has been Fintan Dunne reporting.